Thank you for your time joining us, Major Rivera.
Yes,
So
thank
I would like to start with a sort of introduction. If you can tell us a bit more about yourself, your background, your experience, and we can start from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just start where I joined the Air Force. I joined the Air Force in 2005, July of 2005. I was enlisted as a bioenvironmental engineering technician. I did a few assignments with that, and then I was part of a unique group called the Air Force Radiation Assessment Team, and we did a lot of radiological sampling during Tomodachi, the earthquake and tsunami that happened over in Japan, helping out the Japanese government and the U.S. government with radiological surveys near Fukushima and Sendai. Uh, Through that experience, I was able to fly on numerous aircraft, so that's where the aviation bug really hit me. And
Mhm.
I applied to commission through officer training school and received a pilot slot out of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So that's where my flying career began. I flew uh, in pilot training at Laughlin Air Force Base, T6s and the T1. And then from there, went on through C-130J, the slick version of the C-130 school in Little Rock, and received a mission qualification there. And from there, I went to Kirtland Air Force Base for special mission training and flew the HC-130J Combat King II in training. First operational assignment was Moody Air Force Base with the 71st Rescue Squadron under the 23rd Wing. Did a few deployments there, and then from that, I upgraded to instructor pilot in that assignment, applied for the weapons school, and then PCS to Davis-Monthan Air Force Base with the 79th Rescue Squadron. Did a brief stint there, completed weapons school in 2020 with Class 20 Alpha, and uh, was selected to return to the weapons school and instruct. And I've been there ever since for the last 3 years as a weapons school instructor pilot and evaluator pilot with the 34th Weapons Squadron.
Okay, great. That's a great experience.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this. So let's start to focus on the current assignment. Can you tell us a bit more about the 34th Weapons Squadron, which are the tasks, which are the structure, anything that can allow us to get a better understanding of the squadron?
Yes, absolutely. So the 34th Weapons Squadron, uh, its mission primarily is to produce weapons officers, so individual experts in their mission assigned aircraft, and then also produce advanced instructor course students that will graduate from there and be advanced instructors for loadmaster career fields and the special mission aviator career fields. Which 34th Weapons Squadron is unique. It's one of the few two mission design series or multi-MDS squadrons in the Air Force structure as a whole. So you have the HC-130J Combat King II, which I fly, and we also have HH-60 Whiskey Jolly Green IIs. So the squadron is split to produce experts in those two MDSs through approximately a 5.5 month course.
Okay. And which are the kind of pilots who attend the training courses that you deliver at the 34th Squadron?
Yes, so there's a minimum requirement. All the pilots, we also have combat systems operators, load masters, and special mission aviators. All of them are instructors in their mission design series. They're experienced and they have to be board selected and qualified to attend the weapons school. Typically, they are the top instructors throughout the Air Force in these mission design series or MDSs. And it also just takes, a unique individual that wants to gain more experience and knowledge out of the weapons school, and then translate that into serving as a weapons officer, or what we call it, a tier one instructor back inside the operational squadrons, applying the lessons learned here to day-to-day training missions that eventually distill down into operational execution in whatever theater they will be deployed to.
Okay, do you deliver different kind of courses at the Weapons Squadron, or there's a main one? Which are the different type of flavors, type of courses that you deliver there?
As I said, our primary mission is to produce weapons officers and
Okay.
AIC students or advanced instructor course students. However, on a space available and time available basis, we do provide a combat search and rescue coordinator upgrade for HC-130J pilots and combat systems operators to, on a space available basis, come through our combat search and rescue phase and then receive this qualification, which is a Air Combat Command certified syllabus. Additionally, on the HH-60 side, they can do some flight lead upgrade type sorties within that
Mhm.
kind of high intensity combat environment that we provide for them in training here at Nellis. So there are some additional opportunities within the course.
And if you had to highlight the key challenges for a pilot during the course, can you tell us a bit more about what pilots can expect from the training that is delivered there?
Yes, what I would say from the beginning, it's different than any other Air Force course. So typically, you're trained or instructed. You have a number of syllabus events leading up to your upgrade or qualification. A lot of things at the weapons school are what we term experiential learning, and we also have to understand that these are already instructors, usually experienced instructors in their respective aircraft. So the weapons school provides a training environment and a building block approach to help them become experts and weapons officers. And a lot of that difficulty comes in breaking down their previous instructor habits and how they analyze and dissect a normal training sortie. Uh, what we typically would break them down to is a how, a why, a common error, and an instructional fix in their instruction delivery, and then applying some sort of tactical application to all of their thoughts or mindset moving forward. The next most difficult part for a lot of people, especially in the HC-130J, is the art of the debrief. So distilling a debrief focus point, identifying contributing factors, applying instructional fixes to those, and then coming up with an overall lesson learned, really breaking down that analysis chain so they can create either learning opportunities for their crew members in the future or get to a point where they can develop and further our tactics and employment downrange, kind of just finding new ways of doing things with, airframes that have been around for 60 or 70 years and applying them to emerging challenges is the goal. I think that's really difficult for people to come in here and place this all on their shoulders and have the expectation to think, teach, and grow through that spectrum.
Yeah, clear. And yeah, as you mentioned, now you also operate the HH-60 whiskey.
Yeah.
This has replaced the previous, the Golf one, the Golf variant. The introduction of the new weapon system has led to a transformation in the type of training that you deliver. What has been the change that has been caused by the new type of helicopter?
Yeah, there has been some changes in terms of just outright payload, service ceiling, and speed with the HH-60 whiskey. Also, the integration of digital systems and crew situational awareness is a big part of what we do in both MDSs. There's been a few small drawbacks that we didn't really anticipate. So there's some defensive drawbacks in the loss of a DAIRCM, and then there is a loss of the ability to do some DF or drop circle for isolated personnel finding. But overall, the goal is advancement in situational awareness, and that's what the HH-60 brings us, and the increase in a minor increase in payload capacity for the combat search and rescue mission.
And can you also tell us, we mentioned the new type of helicopter, but also the HH-130J is an advanced variant compared to the previous P or N variant of the HH-130. Can you highlight the main differences between the two types?
Yes, absolutely. I never flew the previous model. I'm what they call
Okay.
a JDB by trade. However, I had experience showing up at Moody as a young lieutenant. There were still a few P models on the ramp. Additionally, just kind of hearing the stories and the way that the HC-130J community has grown over the past 8 to 10 years since the J model came online for the community. And what we really bought was a massive increase in situational awareness. From what I understand, the P model, a lot of the crew roles and responsibilities were very stovepiped or narrow. So the pilot would focus on, pilot flying duties and heads up. Pilot monitoring would monitor those systems, and then you had a navigator that was responsible for navigation of the aircraft. In some cases in the past, you had a radio operator that would handle the communications with outside agencies or mission type communications. And then you had load masters in the back of the aircraft and a flight engineer. So all these stovepipe rules led to, expertise in your specific crew position and situational awareness inside the airplane. What I think the J model brought with the integrated advanced digital avionics, defensive systems, and reduced crew load is to the ability to transition from having all that situational awareness in front of you and then start thinking from the aircraft out. And I think that's the biggest change that we've seen in the HC-130 community is the ability to start to coordinate the rescue effort, understand threat a lot better, react to threat, especially on the RF spectrum, and then continue to push the aircraft and its capability closer to the combat environment within risk to be more effective. I think that's the biggest thing you got out of the J of like knowledge. And then the other ancillary pieces are like the increased horsepower, or not horsepower, sorry, the increased power associated with the J model engines, the FADEC authority, the increased payload capacity, altitude, and speed, and then short range takeoff and performance of the airplane itself on the J model.
Okay, thank you. The J model is often used in for personal recovery. It can be used, in combat situation. How do you train student pilots student pilots with experience to manage all the complexities of the high end and high stress scenarios?
Yeah. Ultimately, we're all kind of creatures of habit. So there's typically like, in the aircrew realm. So there's typically a breakdown to a phase-based approach and then checklists. Because I think if you chunk everything down that happens in a combat search and rescue into phases and you follow checklists through it, and then you apply experience to it, it just like it distills and comes out as sort of an ethos, if you will. So what we do is when we have the students come through the course in the HC-130, it's kind of a ground up approach. The beginning of the weapons school phase for them, aircraft maneuvering phase, is all about max performing the aircraft in the low altitude environment, and then understanding effective use of terrain masking and the aircraft performance and reaction to that perceived threat, excuse me. Then from there, we take them onto a defensive tactics phase where we layer in threats on the RF spectrum and a heavy focus on that to understand what happens with the RWR. And then from there, they can apply that rationale of threat avoidance, just good bread and butter, low altitude tactics, direct terrain masking, and they start to understand the mindset of tactical employment assets, such as the A-10 or the HH-60 and how they push towards a terminal area. The next portion would be applying the crew concepts, the communication and brevity required to execute a tactical event. So for us, it'd be like an airdrop, a helicopter refueling, or some sort of landing on a assault landing on a dirt strip or something along those lines. So now you kind of understand threat, good low altitude flying, and then you execute that mission. So like you're starting to build up experience and understanding how an entire stack of assets would work together with their capabilities, in a like defined area of airspace in relation to a barrier, such as a threat. And then like which we're going to start next week is the combat search and rescue phase. You start focusing in on the isolated personnel, their unique emissions signature that you can collect, and how to increase the survivability of the isolated personnel while kind of, understanding that mental model throughout the whole package and making the time-sensitive execution happen in relation to the execution of the enemy or the threat to getting to that isolated personnel or the threats to the package. And I think that's what we like all try to put together and put into the mindset of the instructors that come out here. And the biggest difference here is that we have the feedback loop for the threat, and we have the feedback loop of the training and the tools that we use, such as recording the flights, the flight parameters, the radar, the RWR, the audio of the crew, and doing full debriefs with 3-dimensional GPS trails. And then getting that feedback loop really helps them understand how to avoid the threat and why time is so critical in a combat search and rescue environment.
Brilliant. Thank you. It's for the insight. It's extremely interesting. And during my visit at Nellis Air Force Base last month, I had the opportunity to see you preparing and launching a mission. Can you share with us a bit more about that specific mission, or what you were doing, which phase of the training was that one, and so on?
Yes, that was in the heart of our defensive tactics phase, and it was a surface to air threat sortie. So what we do is we take the students from a legacy surface to air missile threat defensive missile order of battle, and then we increase the fidelity and level of threat as the sorties move on in the phase. So in the beginning, we might present them with a environment that has SA2, 3, 6, 8, some of those legacy SAMs, because then in training and in briefing, they can start to learn and understand threat basics and then apply the defensive capabilities of the HC-130 against those, and then execute those in a sortie over in the NTTR, the Nellis Test and Training Range, because of the emitters that it has the capability to replicate. So we take it from that level. They learn some of the basics, apply the TTP or tactics, techniques, procedures against those, and then we get a feedback loop from the modeling and simulation capabilities that we have here. From that point forward, we increase the capability of the threat. So we use DMOBs or defensive missile order of battles from later or more advanced SAMs, so 11, 17, 15, 26, so they can start to learn that and apply what they read, apply weaknesses and strengths, weaknesses of the system against strengths of our platform, and then execute those downrange and debrief to them. So what we're going to go do is fly a surface air threat sortie against SA-15s and whatever we can replicate, either by using factor ranges or TAC plots, or flying against joint training emitters within the confines of the range, and coming back and debriefing to those in a low environment.
Yeah. And how do you foresee the role of the HC-130J weapons instruction course evolving in future iteration? Is there any areas that you believe still need an improvement? Because I think this is quite dynamic. Things may change based on the feedback, based on your experience, and also the current scenarios where the U.S. Air Force is currently operating and will operate in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. For the future of the HC-130, what I see is, and we've been working on this a lot, is we work intimately together with the A-10. The A-10 is the rescue mission commander. It has all the lore and history of operating as a Sandy, or a Sandy 1 through 4. However, that future looks kind of limited in our current outlook, and retirements are occurring. And I've spent many years here spending a great number of time with those individuals that fly and employ the A-10 at the highest level, which we call black border instructor pilots of the A-10 at the 66 Weapons Squadron. And a lot of time is spent on translating what they know in the rescue mission commander role and all the tasks and phases that they execute, and finding the asset that's capable of having that situational awareness and commanding and executing the rescue mission when it occurs on a dynamic basis. And what I mean by dynamic basis is being pre-positioned close to whatever mission it is. It could be like a dedicated strike mission or something along those lines, close enough to gain situational awareness from that, and then execute with the assets that are already out there or available within a time-sensitive nature. And that's based on a lot of legacy studies from Southeast Asia and onward for how much time or risk that the isolated personnel has to getting captured. And typically, like, the whole risk thing is time-based. If you can do it within 40 minutes of somebody ejecting, hitting the ground, and you can get the threat mitigated, some sort of recovery vehicle or helicopter in a terminal area with the threat mitigated and out, you can recover that individual fairly rapidly. So based on their knowledge and then our position to the fight in the HC-130, the biggest things that I see evolving are situational awareness for the HC-130, especially in the terminal area. So understanding where the threats are in relation to the isolated personnel and how to mitigate those, because really we don't have an onboard capability of protecting the isolated personnel as a rescue mission commander on the HC-130. It's all just mental knowledge or things that you gather from other assets or situational awareness tools on the airplane, and then communicating those out to whichever asset checks in with you, whether it's an F-16 for a limited amount of time, an F-15, and helping them understand where the threat is in relation to the isolated personnel and what your intent is from getting the rescue vehicle or recovery vehicle, helicopter, whatever it may be, to get to that terminal area where the isolated personnel is and out and be protected. It's a lot to say, but the future of the HC-130 in terms of situational awareness looks pretty decent. We are currently receiving Link 16. We are going to employ with a Link 16 aircraft soon in our integration phase. We've been in the works to have onboard secret internet access, because that opens up the ability to communicate and coordinate more rapidly in that small timeline to pick up an isolated personnel. And we are trying to, and we also have a software upgrade for a lot of our situational awareness tools on board the aircraft. So tablets and laptop at the CISO station, to be able to really understand the common operating picture of what the Air Force is employing at that moment. That's really the key, is just reducing the timeline and reducing the risk to get the recovery vehicle there. So we're trying to take that knowledge from the A-10 community and then hold on to that very specific expertise to execute the combat search and rescue mission, because there's not a lot of assets, or there's almost no asset really that fits that niche capability of large amount of time on station and situational awareness and ability to stay close enough to the threat to communicate to an isolated personnel in a very short period of time.
And after the A-10 is retired, the other aircraft will integrate into the mission, will take over the Sandy role. Are you already training with them? You mentioned the F-16, F-15, or this is something that you will tackle in the future? Is this already part of your training to be prepared in the near future when the type retires?
Yeah, that's something that we think about and work on a lot. I think the problem that you run into is competing priorities with assets like the F-16 and F-15. Usually the integration would be like 10 to 15 minutes of time identifying a threat to the route or the terminal area and then mitigating that threat, or having some sort of seed available for a limited period of time to allow the helicopters to push into a terminal area in vicinity of an RF threat. So we've looked at that from the F-16 side. The problem is persistence. A lot of the vulnerability periods that we execute in, we train to fight to a multiple isolated personnel scenario. So you can have 5 isolated personnel within a, excuse me, I'm going to use miles, within a 40-mile range. Or in the highest end, like integration type of fights that we look at, you're talking about maybe 15 to 20 isolated personnel within an hour to 2-hour period. So the persistence is the key, and to have that situational awareness of, and carry it on board our aircraft prior to the fight, where the most people are going to be at risk and how far away that's going to be, kind of, like I call it sand tabling the scenario and where the threat is, and just kind of like relaying that all through what we call a personal recovery situation update, or holding a 15 line, which is our way of providing an execution brief to get that executed. So the F-16, unfortunately, doesn't have a lot of persistence, and it's one person in the cockpit, and the formation may be a 2-ship, might be a 4-ship, but they have the competing priority of doing seed or strikes. The Strike Eagle has persistence, but they have the primary role of executing strikes in air threat area and a ground threat based area. We've worked with a little bit the F-35, but once again, far forward of where we're looking to execute a CSAR mission. So then we've done a lot of work with the MQ-9. What that buys us on the HC-130 is we have our dedicated syllabus to execute RMC type duties. And now we have a MQ-9 asset that has the ability to have a sensor that has the fidelity to look into the terminal area, and then enough firepower to make it happen with situational awareness of that terminal area that can be pushed to us as the holder of the 15 line, or the execution and game plan for the recovery vehicle to get to that terminal area. So there is going to be a capability gap in that type of dedicated rescue and ground order battle mitigation from the A-10 when they eventually retire, and that's a tough challenge to solve. But the rescue community is always going to be dedicated to use what we have available at the time, that like right now in the present mission. So that's what we work on teaching here at the 34th.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier about all the types of mission that the HH-130J can support, and it's also important to support SAR mission, search and rescue, personal recovery, also your ability to provide air-to-air refueling to helicopters. Can you share a bit more about the complexities of this kind of mission, the type of required training to be proficient at that, and also if you have any specific instances where the teamwork between the HH-130 and the HH-60 squadrons has made a difference also in real war scenarios, in real combat.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you repeat the first part of the question? I'm sorry.
The first part, no problem. It was about the air-to-air refuel, the helicopter air-to-air refueling, which are the main complexities of that kind of mission. That is something that you actually do. So this is something that requires specific training, and so I was curious to learn more about this one.
Oh, absolutely. And I kind of remembered what you mentioned is just the executing the rescue mission with the HC, integrating with the
absolutely.
Okay. For the HC-130 community, I think what interests or brings a lot of our crew into the platform is that we execute on a wide spectrum of operations. So, like ultimately it is a C-130, so we can do normal airdrops, heavy equipment, CDS. Those are different types of airdrops through a lot of environments. So I've seen crews in the HC-130 do the airdrops in vicinity of the Gaza Strip, for instance, just normal bread and butter, what I call bread and butter C-130 stuff on a dynamic nature. And then you get the next portion would be the helicopter refueling aspect. So the HC-130 actually can refuel not just the HH-60, but almost anything that's equipped with a probe. It's on a coalition level too. So I've refueled Harriers, refueled MV-22s, CV-22s, Marine helicopters, etc. And what that really buys you is the ability to bring an asset that's not necessarily persistent closer to the fight. And that's what the C-130 does in terms of like the whole penetrating tanker that you may have heard in the past, or what you may have seen in Afghanistan. It's the ability to bring the HH-60 or whatever asset in a more denied environment or contested denied environment than your traditional tankers, because you have robust defensive capability, redundancy in the platform, and the ability to fly low level and understand the threat as you get there, which I've executed for real world missions in vicinity of, I'll just say generically, say like a high value target takedown in some sort of urban area that's over a great tyranny of distance. So you have to provide the fuel to get the lift platform for the entity. So if that's the HH-60, that's another type of helicopter that we work with in the spectrum of operations with special operations forces, etc. It's the ability to bring that asset closer to the fight and have them be available for a longer period of time, whether that's through a forward area refueling and rearming point by doing a dirt landing somewhere, or holding what we call an airborne alert pattern, and then having that asset fly to us back to the terminal area or the objective area and back, providing that effect. So in real missions, I've seen that happen to great effect, where the HC-130 and HH-60 would be offset in a hole together for a CASEVAC or medevac type scenario, where we have dedicated landing sites and the ability to bring or drag a helicopter great distances, to bring an injured individual to a higher level of care facility. Or I've also seen it to where we can land on, dirt strips at night with no markings on the HC-130, and then have a more rapid means of transit or transload for that survivor to receive higher level of care. I've seen crews execute that mission a few times in my career, and that's in combat. We'll do the same type of partnership or relationship here in a civil environment. So the hurricane just passed through Florida, Panhandle yesterday. I've worked on hurricane or post-hurricane type missions in the past where we do a similar thing. We just pick up a hold near, whatever state or city that's affected, and we have enough gas that the HH-60 can come back and just basically treat us like an airborne gas station, and then find individuals through coordination. So we'll carry, basically a Google map on the plane. We'll get an address for an individual that's on the roof of their house, and we'll send those coordinates to the HH-60 crews as they refuel. So we have a point of common contact there, and then they can fly, pick that individual up, take them to a safer location, and continue to execute the rescue mission. It really is a beautiful relationship.
Next one.
Okay.
And I wanted to learn from you as an instructor pilot with experience on the C-130, if there's something specific to this version of the C-130, the HC-130J, there are specific skills or attributes that you believe are important in order to be a pilot with that specific variant of the C-130, in this specific type of mission, is there anything that, in your opinion, it's important in order to carry out that kind of mission?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say it's excuse me, flexibility. So the HC-130, the mission, combat search and rescue missions, dynamic in nature, and we work with such a wide variety of agencies and expectations. So I would say flexibility. Like a key example of that is as an aircraft commander, I was flying a mission over the Caribbean near the Bahamas, and then we were tasked to just look for an intercept. Sorry,
No problem.
intercept panga boats, or drug running boats from Venezuela or South America
Yeah.
to the U.S. It's kind of a peacetime U.S. defense type of mission. It was integrated with the J-stars, and they would paint radar targets, and we'd go find them and communicate that back to an operations center. In the midst of that mission, we get a notification through, we have a system called HPW, or high performance waveform. It allows us to get through an Outlook interface, data passed back and forth through Outlook emails, Microsoft Outlook, essentially. We received an email that says that there was a bus that overturned, a tour bus for a cruise ship near Rock Sound off of, I believe, the Bermuda or Bahamas. And they needed somebody to get there because we had 3 individuals that were critical, and then one was in a serious condition, and they needed to get to a high level of care facility back to the United States. And they didn't have the capability to carry all those people from the Rock Sound back to, get it mixed up, the Bahamas, and then go through customs and fly on a private jet to Fort Lauderdale, Florida for medical facilities. And then we get that message with a point to go and land. And now, like, my mission and mindset is completely changed from using our electro-optical infrared sensor, identifying boats, drug boats, etc. And now we're landing on an austere landing strip that really didn't have any information about it. I didn't have my normal, what we call a giant report for like stress of the landing surface, or airport facilities directory information. None of that was available. We just knew that there was some U.S. citizens that were critically injured from that tour bus overturning, and they needed help. So we quickly transitioned the crew from the mindset of basically ISR to performing an assault landing to a field and evacuating some injured personnel. So that flexibility piece is incredibly important. And the tools on the HC-130 really enable that. We have our electro-optical infrared sensor. We have the added capability of having a combat systems operator, or CISO, on board the airplane that can back the pilots up with navigation, or just use basically their ability to communicate on the laptop or HPW to handle mission management is another big piece of the HC-130. So from that, we were able to land successfully by doing a low pass, checking out the landing surface. It looked roughly about the same or better than landings I've done in the past in austere locations such as Africa. So I was comfortable with the landing. We did it, and then we were able to fly those individuals back as fast as possible to Fort Lauderdale, and they were ultimately able to save the critical patients' lives, which had internal bleeding, etc. So I would sum it up that the HC-130 is involved in so many things that you have to be extremely flexible and dynamic in nature to execute this mission.
Absolutely. And you already mentioned also during explaining this mission, but can you briefly recap which are the crew members on the HC-130J, and what tasks they carry out when aboard the aircraft? Just to have a quick overview of those roles.
Yes, a combat crew consists of 2 pilots, a pilot, co-pilot, and the positions on the cockpit or flight deck are interchangeable. So either can fly in either seat. General duties would just be the pilot flying, maintaining aircraft, heading, airspeed parameters, altitude, and being responsible for situational awareness of the aircraft position in relation to threat or just general flying. And then your pilot monitoring would be communicating. So they would, as a pilot monitoring duties, air traffic control, outside agencies, and then backing up the pilot on heads up when we're in a low altitude environment, especially at night on night vision goggles, low illumination in the mountains, it becomes incredibly important. And then the third crew member on the flight deck would be the combat systems operator. Traditionally used to be a navigator, but a lot of that stuff now is through FMS, digital display. So it's relatively simple to do navigation in the HC-130. However, when it becomes a little bit more complex, like I mentioned, night, low level, using the radar altimeter and our low power color radar to paint terrain and pick our way through it, that's where the combat systems operator becomes more of a traditional navigator, and we kind of have a cadence, if you will, or a script from the combat systems operator. Does radar scope interpretation, talks the pilot's eyes on to critical obstructions or pieces of terrain, and guides us through flying a modified contour, low level, with employment altitudes as low as 500 feet AGL, or for threat penetration, we could be roughly 300 AGL or less. So that's where the combat systems operator makes most money on the day-to-day sorties at night. And then they are also responsible for extending and retracting the fuel refueling hoses. They're responsible for maintaining the fuel panel, since we have multiple fuel tanks. They are also the sole focal point for the defensive systems on board the aircraft. So managing the missile warning system, the radar warning system, LARCM, or the Large Aircraft Infrared Countermeasure, and then the expendables on board the aircraft. So flare and chaff, and ensuring that they're using the correct terminology to put our aircraft and communicate that to the front end crew to be in the most advantageous aspect towards a threat with the right expendable at the right time. And then the additional things that the combat system operator buys us is we have a situational awareness and communications upgrade in the airplane that brings us data link. We're in saddle now, but we're in the process of upgrading the Link 16. So integrating the information into like a moving map type display on those tablets and laptop, communicating with outside assets through data link, and then bringing in situational awareness from over the horizon assets, or specific items or details that we need to see for either threat mitigation or other pieces of situational awareness is what they're responsible for. And then loading our SATCOM radios, and also communicating through that high performance waveform that I was mentioning to you earlier, to be able to get like Outlook emails sent from the aircraft now. So a lot of it is just situational awareness, threat, and navigation at the combat system operator station. And in the relationship with between the front end, all are really capable of taking on those roles. Most of the switches and functionalities redundant in the cockpit. So if I see a RWR indication, I call a threat, and I expend a chaff, for instance, I have all that capability at my station. I also have the tablets, which are as user-friendly as they can be, but I have the ability to plug in a keyboard or whatever, so we can communicate in that form or fashion through data link or high-performance waveform. So that's kind of the front end of the aircraft. Additionally, on the combat crew, you'd have two loadmasters in the back of the aircraft. You typically have an experienced loadmaster and a less experienced one. And they're responsible for cargo configuration, setting up the aircraft for different types of airdrops or transloads, onload of equipment, personnel. And additionally, here in the weapons school, we also instruct them on the same situational awareness and communications upgrade. So there's a laptop in the back of the airplane, and they're able to basically plug in a Cat 5 cable into it and have an additional laptop and now they can enhance our mission management from the back of the aircraft as well. An example of that would be on a high end, like an integration fight, is battle tracking an F-35's weapons timeout into a RF tactical SAM, such as an SA-15, in vicinity of an isolated personnel at the last point of terrain masking, and then timing that based on the timeout of that munition to where the HH-60s or the A-10s could ingress in that terminal area for the limited amount of time while that threat is mitigated and egress. So you can get all that information on the laptop and through just listening to a fight frequency. And if you're able to put that all together, you can see how that time critical information can come from the loadmaster and then get communicated out through a pilot or a co-pilot to an A-10 mission commander down to a 60 flight lead, not even having to communicate to the F-35 which is unknowingly a part of the rescue mission at that point.
Really interesting. And you mentioned a lot of systems that you have in the aircraft. Is there anything that you would like to add if you had the opportunity? Well, it's something that you said, okay, if I had that sensor, that thing, that would be great.
Yes, absolutely. There's a laundry list of them, and the community is really trying to move forward on obtaining a lot of that. This is going to be a long answer. So it kind of goes back into the old P model mindset and the previous airplane. A lot of that was based on being a good tanking platform or a good tanker. And a lot of individuals had that experience and they moved on to higher positions within the Air Force structure. And they kind of understand like that was the horse they rode into battle. And that's what they understood at the time. But times have changed quite a bit as they always do, and things evolve. So the issue we have a lot of times communicating all these wants and needs that we want for the platform and translating that to somebody that's never had these experiences before. So if I was, king for a day, I would want Link 16, which we're getting soon, which gets you that if we had full functionality, it gets that ability to communicate digitally, reliably, and have a common operational picture for situations like I mentioned. If I can understand where all the threats are being published by the, 15 to 20 F-35s that are out there, or things that are coming in from various means of intelligence, prep of the operational environment, gathering entities, such as, AWACS and the RQ-4 or the RC-135. I can understand all of that. I can make the timeline a lot shorter to executing, to picking up somebody that gets, shot down basically behind enemy lines, if you will. So Link 16 would be the first. Next would be the ability to have some sort of integrated operational picture within the airplane. And that we had a plan to have that. It was called the 2.0 upgrade. So what you would get is integrated functionality from those tough pads and laptop into the aircraft structure. It'd still be federated, but we'd have like a 3 terabyte network attached server that would manage all this information that's flowing into the platform. And then from there, there would be onboard SIPRNet connectivity. So if we can get onboard SIPRNet connectivity, that unlocks a lot of communication or chat capability, or further on over the horizon communication capability with isolated personnel that would decrease that timeline to manage the point of pickup. So those are kind of like the situational awareness tools built into the platform. Also, I don't know if you noticed, the HC-130 has those Sabre Aerodyne bubble doors on the airtroop doors. Those have the capability to basically have what's called a Sabre arm, and it would connect to the side of the aircraft. And there's a lot of look into podded solutions to the HC-130 to allow us to incorporate an agile pod, or we've executed here. I think in class 21 Alpha, we had a lightning pod on the aircraft, and we were able to laser designate targets, identify points of interest or targets from a standoff distance. So that situational awareness and timeline piece to an asset that checks in with you is much more rapid. If you can, slew the pod, identify a target of interest, and then pass that information to an asset that has 5-10 minutes on station with a few bombs, you can affect or shape that environment for the recovery vehicle quicker. And that was demonstrated with a Lightning pod in 21 Alpha Wizen. The next piece is the links or some sort of SAR map capability that we're going to hold for a sec for the phone call.
Yeah.
So the SAR map capability doesn't have to be a links, but it also buys you what I said is a big gap for the HC-130 is terminal area situational awareness, because our EOIR doesn't have a lot of high fidelity from a grade offset. Like it's probably good from 3 to 5 miles, 3 to 5,000 feet. So that doesn't really buy you a lot in as you increase the threat. So what that SAR map capability gets you is just the ability to identify within gated ranges from the isolated personnel any type of moving threats or any movers in that terminal area. And then we can start to package that into what we call like a line 13 or a game plan to account for those threats as the recovery vehicles execute. So let's see. I think that's a pretty good start. There's been a lot of talk in our community, and I've done some personal work early in my career on attempting to maybe weaponize the HC-130 with like solutions that already existed out there, something along the lines of like the Harvest Hawk, the Griffin missile, etc. But as I grew and gained experience in this community, one, it's a really hard mental model to break within our community to go from, airdrop, air land, HAR, helicopter refueling, and then going home to like, hey, now we're going to try to PID or positively identify targets. We're going to do collateral damage estimations. We're going to do all this stuff and then flip a community. Like the Marine Corps was very flexible in doing that, using NFOs or pilots and other weapon systems to, like, instead of an air liaison tour, officer tour, they'd go on the KC-130 and they would employ their skills there. So it's quite a stretch for the HC community. The other thing I learned is that things like the Griffin missile or the Hellfire missile, they don't have a lot of range or stick, if you will. So in this current environment, as I've seen the community grow in the last 10 years, we're focused a lot on pacing threat, near peer threat. That's where a lot of the conversation comes in terms of capability, money, equipment, training. So it doesn't really have a lot of relevancy in that type of environment, because if you can't have the stick to reach out to destroy the thing that's a threat, then why carry it and why train to it? So I'm more now in the realm of situational awareness tools to communicate to an asset that has that capability with speed and, GBU 39 or something along those lines that creates effect at the point of impact that we need. Yeah.
Thank you very much. You have provided tons of interesting details and information. Yeah. So my last question is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to add in order to get a better picture of your community or the 34th Weapons Squadron?
Yes, there's some unique things that happen at the 34th Weapons Squadron. One, like, we have a motto, it's the best job I ever had, and I truly believe that. I'm hitting the end of my career, and this is kind of like the highlight of my career is creating those weapons officers. Unique things that we do in the HC-130 that I just want to highlight at the weapons school. We spend in the defensive tactics phase, we spend a good amount of time doing air-to-air combat maneuvering training. So we do a lot of low-level, low-altitude employment against the 64th Aggressor Squadron, 65th Aggressor Squadron, and we take a lot of that information and develop our tactics, techniques, and procedures out of that. Individuals at the 34th, like the cadre there, we work really hard to take the lessons learned that we have and we put them in our tactics, techniques, and procedures volumes, and we rewrite those on a normal basis. So a lot of that stuff gets understood and put in there. And we work from like beyond visual range all the way down to, you know, within visual range to the guns arena. And we'll repeat that and teach that because it's important for pacing threat understanding. The next piece is just continuing to push and evolve the community and kind of, if you will, pull the ball and chain towards relevancy in the future. I'm not one to be so in love with my own platform to think that like it's going to be the end all be all for the future, but I'm all about squeezing capability with what we have to execute to present day and understand what we need in the future to have the mission happen. So things that are an example of that is, you know, in integration phase, a lot of times the environments that we're looking at are great standoff distances to pacing air threats, which I'm sure you understand, and how the, you know, the U.S. Air Force or the coalition of the joint force can really mitigate or compete in that environment. And then the HC-130, you know, like we have a lot of situational awareness to create effects there. And, you know, there's things like the Rapid Dragon program, for instance, that we've put a lot of work into understanding and attempting to execute on a simulated basis in these vulnerability periods that we execute in. So I think that's also important to highlight. Overall, I'm just proud to do this. I'm happy to talk about our community to you and kind of like shed some light on how fortunate some of the people may not even realize they are when they become an HC-130 crew member.
Thank you very much for your time answering all these questions. It was a pleasure talking with you, Major Rivera. And I look forward to providing all our readers more details about the interesting mission of the HC-130J and the 34th Weapons Squadron. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Oh, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. I've actually read some of your articles in the past. I think you contribute to Combat Aircraft magazine.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
yeah,
be a pretty avid subscriber to that, and I enjoy reading those articles.